nuclei, somewhere in that region. Is that so, righty? About 46 or 48, about 23 million pontine nuclei on either side. Reasonable? So, therefore, what is that telling you? That the neocerebellum is dependent upon our vast input so as to get this synergy of movement. So therefore, what we find is from all parts of the cortex, they come down via corticopontine fibers. So there will be frontopontine fibers that predominate, isn't that so? Because frontal is motor. Then there will be paratopontine. We're just talking, we need to see occipitopontine, and they are temporopontine to recognize things. Is it reasonable? So that there is a vast input. So all of this input will come from all parts of the what? The cortex, isn't that so? And then feed into what? The various parts of the internal capsule, isn't that so? It will feed in now to the what? To the various parts of the internal capsule, and then synapse on the what? On the pontine nuclei. Okay, so they're going to synapse here on the, I think there are about 23 million nuclei on either side. Okay, it's like about 46 million. Okay, so they're going to synapse here, and then they are going to now form the what? The transverse pontocerebellar fibers. So these are the transverse pontocerebellar fibers. And they are doing what? They are crossing to the what? To the opposite side. Okay? So in this case, we're coming from the left side. Isn't that so? We're descending down, reasonably on the left side. We're going to then to the left pontine nuclei, and then via transverse pontocerebellar fibers, we're going to go across. Reasonable? And we are going to go across. Okay? And we are going to ascend. These fibers are what type of fibers, Patrick? These are mossy fibers. JP, these are mossy fibers that are coming in? Right. These are mossy fibers. Which cells are they ending on nuclear density? The granular cells. They're the base of the tree, right? Not the stars in the sky. They're not the stellate, right? They are the mossy. So they're going to come in and end on which cells? On the granular cells. So they're crossing, therefore, to the what? To the right cerebellar hemisphere. Okay? So they're going to cross to the right they're crossing to the right cerebellar hemisphere. And they cross in the pons. And Royty, what does the word pons mean? Bridge. And JP used to go to a place called Ponto Verrocchio. Right? So when he visits a place called, what's that place called again now? Venice. Venezia. Right? Is that Venice? See Venice Van Dyke? Very good. JP usually spends a lot of time in Venice. Right? So therefore you have all these bridges. One, the famous one is Ponto Verrocchio. Right? So we go across, reasonable, feed on to the what? The contralateral cerebellar hemisphere. Then finally from the granular cells to the Purkinje, reasonable, and then those cells will now feed down to the what? To which nucleus? So they're going to end the granular cells, then to the Purkinje, and then will finally feed down to the what? To the dentate nucleus. Reasonable? So in that cerebellum there is the what? The dentate nucleus. Alright? Okay, JP, will they be inhibitory? They go on, they're inhibitory to the dentate nucleus. Reasonable? Alright? From the dentate nucleus. Okay, from the dentate nucleus, what will happen now? They are going to exit via what? Via the what? They will exit via the what? Via blue now. So they will exit via the what? The superior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? They exit via the superior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? And when after leaving the superior cerebellar peduncle, then they do what? They go in the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. So they will cross back over. Reasonable? To the opposite side. So they're going from left and coming down and going through the right cerebellar peduncle to feed onto the right dentate nucleus. Then they come back, cross in the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle, and then they feed around the what? The red nucleus. Do they have anything to do with it? No. They just form a halo around it. And from there, where do they then go on to now? They will then end on the VL nucleus. Reasonable? They will end on the VL nucleus. Reasonable? So they go on to the VL nucleus of the thalamus. Reasonable? They feed on to the VL nucleus of the thalamus. Then now they form thalamocortical projections, reasonable? And they will go in the various parts of the but this one is going now, basically now they are going primarily now to where? Through the genu of the internal capsule, reasonable? So VA and VL are found primarily in the genu of the internal capsule. They will then go into the what? Corona radiata, reasonable? And then feed on primarily to where? Motor, primary motor, and supplementary motor cortex. So they will feed on primarily to primary motor, premotor, and supplementary motor cortex. Reasonable? All right? Okay, so if you damage the right cerebellum, then we expect to see effects on the right side. We will see effects on the right side because from the motor area we're going to get the what? From the motor area we're going to get now the what? The corticospinal tract. That corticospinal tract is going to come down in the internal capsule, will pass through the what? The basilar part of the pons, and then come into the pyramid, and then what? Cross to the opposite side. Reasonable? So therefore, if you damage the right cerebellar hemisphere, you'll see the effects on the right side. Okay? So if you see all of that crossing, you see what's happening there? Alright, so if you damage. So once you know where all of this crossing is occurring. So once again, for synergy of movement, you need a pathway. And what's the efferent pathway known as? So the afferent pathway to the neocerebellum is cortico-pontocerebellum. The efferent pathway is dentato-rubro-thalamocortical. But some books drop out the rubral because it really doesn't have anything to do there. So it is just referred as the dentato-thalamocortical tract. Reasonable? The afferent is cortico-pontocerebellum. Reasonable? So once again, it starts, as I said, from all parts of the cerebral hemisphere through the very important corticopontine fibers. They enter into the corona radiata, nearly all parts of the internal capsule. Then from the internal capsule, they go into the pus cerebri. And when you look at the pus cerebri, we see that the middle 1/5 is purely for frontopontine fibers, saying how important the motor part is, and the lateral 1/5 is for occipitopontine, temporopontine, and paratopontine. Okay? We have about 23 million nuclei. So these fibers now, about 23 million of them on either side, will end now in the pontine nuclei of the what? The ipsilateral side, reasonable, and then will cross over. Reasonable? As mossy fibers of Ladenqui. You know a man named Dr. Patrick Ladenqui? He was quite a man in his younger days. Right? Lots of girlfriends. Alright? Then they will feed into which cells? The granular, the granular cells. Then they will feed out to pyramidal cells. And these will be inhibitory, is that so? Purkinje cells, the Purkinje to the what? To the dentate nucleus. Reasonable? And from the dentate nucleus, we have a tract known as the dentato-thalamocortical. And the dentato-thalamocortical tract is destined for where? Yes, for VL. But where it finally wants to go is the motor cortex. Motor, premotor, and supplementary motor. So that when you execute that movement, it is a fine coordinated movement. So the cerebellum it's sometimes referred to as a great comparator. Right? It gets all of this input from all parts. Reasonable? Then it descends, as I said, goes in, then as I said, exits, right, through the superior cerebellar peduncle, then crosses in the decussation to the opposite side, envelops the red nucleus, and after enveloping the red nucleus, now we'll go on to the VL nucleus, and from the VL nucleus, will know via thalamocortical in what part of the internal capsule? Genius. And from the corona radiata feeding on to motor, premotor and supplementary motor cortex. So therefore it's going to affect the activity of the pyramidal pathway and also they affect the activity of the corticobulbar pathway. Reasonable? Alright? So those cells that are exiting from lamina 5, so the corticospinal, which is carrying now the information, will now pass through the corticospinal tract and then now at the decussation will cross to the opposite side. Reasonable? Similarly, the cranial nerve nuclei are supplied on the contralateral side. So we'll see the effects on the opposite side which refers to the cranial nerve nuclei and also the corticospinal tract. Reasonable? Alright. But the important thing is still just visualize these people, these Chinese people at the what? The circle. Okay, and to see them what? Flying around in the air. Reasonable? And then they just grab each other like that. Okay? No. Alright? So I used to use the analogy first of a neurosurgeon. Everybody think of a neurosurgeon doing very highly things. But when I really checked it out, it wasn't really, it's not very what? Dynamic. So then I moved to a rally car driver. My brother used to love me through cane fields. Right? And one time I went right over the precipice. Right? Very good. I think it had a crane to pull the car up. Very good. Very good. So the rally car driver, he's dependent like a man like, you know, man like Michael Schumacher. JP knows him, right? So like a man like Michael Schumacher, he's moving at what? Like how much, I don't know how fast they drive. I don't know what speeds they're going at. Lennox, what speed do they go at?
I'm not certain.
You're a rally car man, what speed?
I would think about 100 on Much more than that?
What does GP say? Maybe what speed are they traveling at? No man, when you're doing the rally thing, what speed are they going at, JP? About 2 what? 250? Alright, leave it alone. Alright, so off this time. Very, very well. So like that, reasonable. So the visual, so think of the rally car, right? So you have to be listening to all sounds in front, what is happening in front of you, and what? Responding very fast. Isn't that so, Betty? So he's using the cerebellum to the maximum. Okay? All right. Relax. So let's look now at the. Let's go to the hard one, and that is the one that has a bit of a complicated thing. Let's say no, the spinocerebellum. Very good. So there is a middle cerebellar peduncle. Give a chance. There's an inferior cerebellar peduncle. Give a chance. There's an inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, there's a middle. Alright, just relax. Alright, and there is a what? A superior. Reasonable, there is a superior cerebellar peduncle. Alright? And very important is to put the what? The midline in. Isn't that so? You want to follow from the midline. Okay, so the main input to it we're talking about, this one is called what? Paliocerebellum, which is also known as the what? The spinocerebellum, also known as the paravermalaria, also the anterior lobe. The what lobe? The anterior lobe. Right? The anterior lobe. Right? So, the input is coming via way of what? So the receptors are in we said, the muscle spindles, right? The Golgi tendon organs, other receptors in the capsules, ligaments, cutaneous receptors that are going to send stretch, that's going to give us what? Joint sense information. How that joint is, right? So the amount of stretch and all that is going to give you a sensation of whether we are flexed, extended, and reasonable, okay? So where are the cell bodies for the first order neurons? Where the first cell bodies for the first order neurons in this pathway, for the paleocerebellum. Cell bodies for the first order neurons are located where? Where are they located? So paleocerebellum, which is for posture, muscle tone, and reflexes. So what's going to happen if we damage the paleocerebellum? Where the posture is going to be altered, as I saw in my friend, very altered posture. Then muscle tone, they're going to get what? Hypertonia or hypotonia. Hypotonia, reasonable, and they will also get asthenia. Okay, so you ask them to go like this, you just see one hand starting to drift. Reasonable, so just drift, right? You have Mr. Jones, go like this, and just sit one side, drifting. Reasonable? Okay, so they're going to then, and then they get what's called ragdoll appearance. Reasonable? So the joints, for example, what keeps the head of the humerus in the glenoid cavity? What keeps it in is the rotator cuff. If you damage the rotator cuff or the tone is lost, then the head of the humerus wants to fall out. So they get what's called ragdoll appearance. Reasonable? Okay. So the cell bodies for the first order neurons are in the where? Dorsal DRG, the dorsal root ganglion. Reasonable? The cell bodies for the first order neurons are in the dorsal root ganglion. Okay? And then they will come and synapse in which nucleus? So they come into the dorsal gray horn and synapse in which nucleus? Clark's column, 300 marks. They will synapse, so the cell bodies for the second order neurons are, so the first order neurons are in the what? In the DRG. And then now come in, right? And then now they will synapse in what? In Clark's column. Reasonable? The cell bodies for the second order neurons are in Clark's column. And then we remember that Clark's column is going from where? Clark's column is going from where? It's going from C8 down to about L2. Reasonable? So when we come in, but then remember, we can come in below what? L2. Reasonable? We can come in something different. Very good. Very good. Thanks, JP. So we can come in what? So Clark's column is what? Clark's column is going to be between so it's between what? C8 and L2. Reasonable? So from the dorsal root ganglion, we were going to come in and then synapse. But as Dr. Francis was pointing out to you, we may be coming below what? L2. Reasonable? So we may be, for example, doing, for example, dorsiflexion or plantar flexion. Reasonable? What myotomes are going to be for the ankle joint? For plantar flexion. S1, S2. Reasonable? Dorsiflexion is L5, S1, and that is S1, S2. Reasonable? Alright, L4, L5, L4, L5, and then no plantar flexion is S1, S2, right? The calf muscles. Just relax. So we may come in below that level, and if we come in below that level, there is no Clark's column. Reasonable? So therefore, what do we then do if there's no Clark's column? We then have to ascend up the what? The fasciculus gracilis. Reasonable? From the fasciculus gracilis, and then when we reach Clark's column, we will therefore synapse in Clark's column. Okay? Then you have a case of when you come in above Clark's column. For example, what's the innervation to the shoulder joint? Shoulder joint is a C5, 6 joint. So we may come in proprioceptive from the glenohumeral joint, and there is no Clark's column. So when there is no Clark's column, then we're going to ascend in the what? The cuneate fasciculus cuneatus. Reasonable? Down here we're ascending in the fasciculus gracilis before we can do business with the Clark's column. When we come in above that level now, there is no Clark's column. So therefore have to go into the fasciculus cuneatus, and on that fasciculus cuneatus, those fibers are going to synapse in the what? In the accessory cuneate nucleus, which Dr. Ledenk mentioned to you. And from the accessory cuneate nucleus, you're going to enter the cerebellum via the cuneo-cerebellar pathway. Through which peduncle? The inferior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? Alright, so where's our diagram here now? This one. Okay? Alright. So, when we're coming in, we can either do, when we're leaving Clark's column, we're just coming in by Clark's column, we can either do one of two things. One is to ascend ipsilaterally, the other one is to ascend contralaterally. So we can ascend either ipsilaterally or we can ascend contralaterally. The one that is ascending contralaterally is the what? Anterior spinocerebellar pathway. The one that is ascending ipsilaterally is the posterior spinocerebellar pathway. Reasonable? So we come in through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? Right? And then we feed into which nuclei of the cerebellum are we feeding into now? We see it feeding into now. It's going to feed in, these fibers are going to feed in and end on, well, they feed first to the Purkinje cell, isn't that so? They will go first to the Purkinje cell. 1 second, yeah? They feed first to the Purkinje cell, and then now from the Purkinje cells they will feed down now to what? To the nuclei. And which nuclei are these involved now? The globosan embelliform. The globosan embelliform. And together, the two together are known as the what? Interposed nuclei. Reasonable? So there, this anterior spinocerebellar tract takes the long pathway, goes through the what? Ascends now through the whole of the medulla, ascends through the tegmentum of the pons, enters into the tegmentum of the midbrain, and then will go through the what? The superior cerebellar peduncle. Then in the substance of the cerebellum, will cross back over to the opposite side. Reasonable? So what does it do? It does a double cross. It crosses at the spinal level, and it crosses in the cerebellum. Right? No. Right. Reasonable? So here are the red nuclei right here. Reasonable? Okay? Okay? So as Shamar is pointing out, everything in the cerebellum is what? Ipsilateral. Reasonable? So remember, proprioceptive input from muscle fibers, stretch receptors, those stretch receptors, etc. And then the cell bodies for the first order neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion. We're talking about joint sense information. We then synapse in the Clark's nucleus, also known as the nucleus dorsalis or thoracic nucleus. And from here we can either ascend ipsilaterally or contralaterally. Posterior spinocerebellar tract is a ipsilateral. He goes a quick way. Some people like to take the long route in life. I don't know. Barnett and myself are like just the way the brain is hardwired. Patrick Ledenko takes the what? The short route. The short route man. I don't know yes about Dr. Francis. That little later I will find out. But anyway, so they take the different routes, isn't that so? So the anterior spinocerebellum will cross, then ascend, go through the superior cerebellar peduncle, then in the substance of the cerebellum feeds over to the contralateral side, to its own side. Okay? So then now the output is leaving, and the output is called interposed rubral pathway. And that interposed rubral pathway will lead through the what? The superior cerebellar peduncle, isn't that so? From the globosan embelliform, leaving through the superior cerebellar peduncle, then doing what? Crossing in the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle, crossing in the superior decussation of the cerebellum to what? To feed into the contralateral red nucleus. Okay, so most of those fibers will feed into the contralateral red nucleus. Okay? Now, once they feed into the contralateral red nucleus, what will happen? The rubrospinal tract. And what happens to the rubrospinal tract? As it forms, it what? It crosses. Okay, so we get what is called a crossing. And then we'll descend very importantly as your rubrospinal pathway, okay? Primarily as the rubrospinal pathway, which will have the opposite effect to which pathway? The vestibulospinal, right? So we have two pathways that are coming off, the vestibulospinal. So what I noticed in my friend is that there were instances where the vestibulospinal pathway is working and then suddenly they wouldn't work. And I just see her fall back, like, I have to hold her again and then she comes back. Then it just falls back again. So it's as if like a car is missing. Practically, then we don't know about missing cars. So when you have these old vintage cars, right, they tend to miss, right? So it's as if it's missing. And then sometimes it's working, and then sometimes it's not working. Okay, balance and then loses. Then it back to again. And it works for a while. Alright? So very important is the rubrospinal pathway, which is facilitatory to the flexors and inhibitory to the extensors, having the very opposite effect to the what? So they're working together, vestibulospinal and rubrospinal. Reasonable? Alright? Okay. Some of these fibers that are leaving the red nucleus, watch here very carefully. Some of these fibers now that are leaving the red nucleus will go down and synapse on what? Will synapse on what? Some of these fibers that are going down are going to synapse on the inferior olivary nucleus. So they go to the olive. They will go to the where? To the olive. And synapse on the inferior olivary nucleus. Right? And so you have rubro-olivary fibers. Rubro-olivary fibers. Okay? And then those are going to form olivocerebellar fibers. Reasonable? Those fibers will then form olivocerebellar fibers. Reasonable? Which are going to cross back to the what? To the opposite side. Reasonable? And feed back through primarily your inferior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? To the what? To the contralateral, to the opposite what? Nuclei. Okay, so they will go back to the cerebellum. So there is a loop that is occurring. Give a chance. There is a loop that is occurring. Okay? Now at the same time, as Professor Louboutin pointed out, from the pallidum, they are pallidorubral fibers and they are pallido-olivary fibers. Reasonable? So let's just say they're from the GP, they are, so it was once thought that they just went as far down as the pedunculopontine nucleus, right? But now they have shown now where there are pathways going down to the what? To the olive. So the olive common sense, what's the function of that pathway for the olive and this whole pathway that I described with the olivary nucleus? What's the function? Automatic movements. What kind of movement? Like sort of little things, movements like train, like you're sewing. You know, women like to sew.
No.
Women like to sew, right? Is that so? Yes or no? Women spend a lot of time like crocheting and sewing. Isn't that so right for you? Right? I'm sure your daughters yesterday doing a lot of crocheting and sewing in the night. You know, like making little babies, shoes and all those kind of things. Right? Roy has two daughters and I'm sure he observes them doing a lot of sewing. Right? Girls, they like to sew a lot. Isn't that so, Shamara? A lot of sewing, right? So that sort of repetitive sewing movement is under control of the olive. Reasonable? All right. No. Give a chance, Warren. No, it's all right, sweetheart. No. No, she asked a question. No, she asked a question. Descending autonomic pathways. No. Okay. So no. By the way, what have we missed out in this diagram? Anything that we missed out in this diagram? That's very, very important for the paleocerebellum. Our patient doesn't have a head. This patient has no head because we have to get proprioceptive input coming from the head, and that is through trigeminocerebellar pathways. And which nucleus is very important? The mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal. So, Patrick Ledenfrid, Dr. Ledenfrid, do the trigeminocerebellar pass through the superior, the middle, or the inferior cerebellar peduncle? Alright? So we can't set that in the exam. Why? Because some books say superior, other books say inferior. So we can't say that. Alright, isn't that so? Right. But the important is the trigeminocerebellum. So if we do it, then the patient wouldn't have a head. So the input to the palliacerebellum would include anterior, posterior, spinocerebellar, cuniocerebellar, trigeminocerebellar. And then, as Dr. Ledenfrid pointed out, are all the various non-transmitters, because Locus coeruleus will feed to all part, Ruffin nucleus, all of these things will carry on noradrenergic, serotonin, dopamine, and all of those type of things. So together we have all those pathways. Reasonable? All right. And we said, so important thing is to note with this diagram, the most important thing to note is that we're coming through the inferior cerebellar peduncle and the superior. That the anterior is going to double cross, that the posterior ends up ipsilaterally together with the cuniocerebellar, that they feed on to the interposed nucleus, leave through the superior cerebellar peduncle, leave through the superior cerebellar peduncle, cross in the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle, feeding on to the contralateral red nucleus, and then forming a tract known as the rubrospinal tract, which immediately as it forms will cross back, and then descend down to be facilitator to the flexors and inhibitor to the extensors, having the opposite effect to the vestibulosphincter. We need also to point out that the red nucleus is going to take some of that input and send it down to the ipsilateral olive, and then through olivocerebellar fibers through the inferior cerebellar peduncle back to the cerebellum again. So there's a circuit, and that is for automatic movements. And we need to point out that the red nucleus is under effect of the globus pallidus, reasonable, and that the red nucleus is also going to be, the globus pallidus is also going to be affecting the. Now what about the last thing, and then I'm finished, and that's the vestibulocerebellum. That's easy. The vestibulocerebellum is easy, okay? We don't even have to make a diagram. It is so easy. Where the cell bodies for the first order neurons. So where are the receptors? So listen to me. So this is for balance, reasonable. Okay, so there's for balance. Okay, so we see the receptors are in there. My dear, little checker top. What's your name, my dear? And so little daughter, tiger looking outfit. Jordan, what is that lady, the tiger outfit by the name? What's her name? Trish. Okay, that's Trish. Very good. So Trish, what's the, so when we have the, so look Trish, look where the black pointer is. See right here? There. See right here? So that is the what? That is the midline cerebellum right here. Okay? So that functions basically so you can stand up. Reasonable? So then what we usually ask the patient to do is to, Mr. Jones, stand on your toes. Reasonable? So Mr. Jones has to stand, not just like this, but he has to stand on his toes. Then we ask him to walk in tandem. Okay? And then now to see if he can stand up on his toes or if he can walk along a straight line in tandem. Okay? Okay? So we're testing the what? The vestibulocerebellum. Reasonable? No. Balance. So Trish, very good. That's the name. A fancy name, you know. So where are the receptors, we say? For balance. Where are the receptors? Where are the receptors? I can't hear you. In the air, yeah, but what part of the air? In the semicircular canals, the utricle and the saccule. When you're a little girl, did anybody spin you around? Nobody ever spun you around when you're a little girl? I don't mean that. Nobody took you to them hop gardens and spin you around? Alright? Okay? Or they take you like this and hold you like that and then spin you fast around, like some kind of force that your body's like this and you're going around like that. fastest, you know, and it is, and they put you to stand up and what happened? You just boom. Okay, so all the fluid in the what? In the semicircular canals is so the receptors are in the semicircular canals, the utricle and the saccule. Where's the cell body for the first order neuron? The vestibular ganglion, very good, also known as Scarpa's ganglion. Where would you find that ganglion? Where is it located? In the internal acoustic meatus, isn't that so? In the internal acoustic meatus. So the cell body of the first order neuron has a peripheral process and it has a central process. The peripheral process are going to the semicircular canals, the utricle, and the saccule. Reasonable? And then now, the cell body for the first order neuron is in the vestibular ganglion, also known as Scarpa's ganglion. Reasonable? Which is right at the level of the fundus, near the fundus of the internal acoustic meatus. So, the central processes are now traveling in the vestibular part of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Reasonable? And these are going to exit the internal acoustic meatus. Reasonable? And then, by the way, no, we have to go back to this. Very, very important. No, this one. Okay. You see, my colleagues are going to ask you a lot of questions about these fibers, you know. Look at those fibers. These olivocerebellar fibers. What about these olivocerebellar fibers? Jordan, if you, Dr. Ledinki spoke a lot about them. The olivocerebellar fibers. These are the exception to the rule. These are called what kind of fibers? Climbing fibers. So remember, we have mossy fibers and we have climbing fibers. Okay? So remember that. Those are climbing fibers. And where will they end? Dr. Ledinki, where do they end again? Your climbing fibers. They go on the Purkinje directly, on the dendrites. Reasonable? Very good. So let's get back to this. So this is the cell body of the first order neuron. Central process traveling in the vestibular part of the vestibulocochlear nerve. And then that vestibulocochlear nerve, very important, right, is in the vestibulocochlear nerve. Now, this vestibulocochlear nerve is a very important nerve. Clinically, it's very important. What kind of cells are going to be around it? These are Schwann cells, isn't that so? Yes. So they can get what's called a schwannoma or an acoustic neuroma. Reasonable? So this is a common, not an uncommon thing. When you go to the ENT clinic, right? I had a medical student just the other day, and she had an acoustic neuroma. Reasonable? Very, very bad. Rough story for her. Okay? And when her phone is ringing, she can't even say where the phone is ringing because they can't echolocate, they don't know. Reasonable? So the phone is ringing, she hears all kind of noises, but she doesn't know where the noise is coming from. Okay? Can't. So other than balance and all these kind of things, and then which nerve is it traveling with? The facial nerve. So therefore it's affecting. So you're going to see a lot of cases of acoustic neuromas. Reasonable? So one of my good friends, that's how she died. She's very, very good. No, I mean they're very, very good on the case. Right. Well, I have worked it out. No. I have worked it out now, and I've worked that the next one will be me. Because all of them have gone. Yes. So I'm just, well, those are more academic. We're talking about more, you know, these academic friends, and still very close friends. We're talking more your school friends and your girlfriends and boyfriends. But one of my close friends, she was about 6'2", and she would come to Lime Key with me, right? And then strange, she's so tall, and then once in a while she started to fall. So I said, what has happened now? But she's tall, you know, she'll be falling in the sand sometimes. So, say her name is Joni. Well, Joni, so she said, you know, Mike, I think it's something with the joints and this and that and the other. So the rheumatologist got with her and she spent vast sums on rheumatology treatment and this and that and the other. Then she'd say to me, you know, Mike, I'm not hearing you on the phone. Then my mouth is feeling dry. I said, look, and they were treating her, giving her hearing aid and she had all sort of madness. I said, you know, Joni, I think you would better take it to a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. So I took Joni to the neurosurgeon, which was Professor Crandall. So he ordered the thing, blam. And then what they found out from the MRI, a massive acoustic neuroma. So the dryness of the mouth, the falling down, all of these things, the lack of hearing, all of that was vestibular cochlea. And she was slated to get her operation, very sad. And one Sunday evening, I got a call. She was getting out of the bed to go and take a pee, and then no, she couldn't move that fast. The urine came down, and she slipped. 6'2" and on the head, boom. And that was it. That was reasonable, gone. And she said, sad thing is that she donated her body to anatomy. So poor Michael Gardner had to end up with my good friend from I was 17 in anatomy. Right. She's sections of her head are in my office. But at least you will what now? You will remember acoustic neuroma. You will not forget acoustic neuroma. So just lastly, and then I finish up, one of the medical students who are graduated asked me, you know, he's like a consultant now, you know. He said, tell me, Michael, all those stories you tell, are they really true? Right, so we're finishing up now. So the important thing is that we're coming in the vestibular cochlea, feeding on to the vestibular nuclei, from the vestibular nuclei via through the inferior cerebellar peduncle to a vestibulocerebellar. Reasonable? Which will feed on to the cortex of the what? Of this vermal area, flocculus and nodule. From there now, through the Purkinje cells to the fastigial nucleus. Reasonable? So we're going to come back now, back to the fastigial nucleus, and the output is known as, you can call it fastigial nuclear, fastigio bulbar, fastigio vestibular. They really boil down to the same thing. Fastigio nuclear, fastigio bulbar, because it's in the bulb, or fastigio vestibular, which will go back to the vestibular nuclei, which Dr. Venenko says you must remember by smile, right, Patrick? Smile, okay? And then form a tract known as the vestibulospinal tract. Okay? Alright? So it's in the vestibular cerebellum, it's in very primitive animals like the what? The fishes. And in the fishes you see a line going down the side of the fish, and that's called the lateral line. And that's going to be connected with that. Now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lennox Francis, and thank you very much. Very much.